Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to The Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith. Jeff Benedict is here with us, New York Times bestseller. The new Tiger Woods book is out. Jeff and Armin Katayan wrote it. Jeff, it's great to have you. How are you?
Great to be here.
So there's a lot to unpack. I just got the book yesterday, starting to get into it. Let's start with the way you guys start. Even before the incident in 2009, you start with the death of Earl Woods and him getting buried in Kansas, and there's a lot of different layers to that. And I feel like the death of Earl was a huge part of Tiger's life. How significant was that, and how crazy was it to hear about that story where he doesn't even have a tombstone where he's laid to rest?
Yeah, it doesn't even have a grave marker.
Wow.
We went to Kansas because, doing a biography, you're going to start with the roots. And the roots of Tiger's family tree, part of those roots are in Kansas because that's where Earl Woods, his father, was born, raised. Naturally, we went back there to do research, and one of the things we wanted to do was just go to the cemetery and look at his gravestone and see what was there. We had no idea that there was nothing there.
Wow.
We went looking, assuming this was going to be a simple thing. When we couldn't find it, we started wondering, what's going on here? We interviewed the sexton at the cemetery and then discovered that he was a great interview, and he had the whole story of the burial. But the important thing was he said, that there is no headstone, there's no grave marker, there isn't anything. Like, you need Google Earth to find where he's located. And right away we're thinking, Earl Woods has an obituary in the New York Times. I mean, very few humans have their obituaries in the New York Times. His is there because he's the father of the greatest golfer who's ever lived, and he doesn't have a gravestone? What is going on here? To me, that's a great way. Armin and I talked about this a lot. I felt that that's a great way to signal to the reader in the prologue, before you even open chapter 1, we want to take you places that you've never been. We want to show you things that you've never seen. These are the things we found as journalists for 3 years trying to reconstruct the life of Tiger Woods. And if you want to know how interesting it's going to be, we're going to start in a cemetery with a guy who's buried underneath the ground that you can't find.
Yeah, certainly didn't expect it to start there. And understanding the why in all of Tiger's life is really interesting. So when you think about Tiger, meteoric rise, all-time high peak in golf, and the fact that he kept it together for that long, thinking about what he went through as a kid, his whole life on camera, his father's right there with him, his mom is right there with him. There is so much there. The fact that he kept it together that long, isn't it even more amazing that he got to that point than maybe the fall itself?
I think when you look at, I remember writing these chapters, the lead up to the crash. Tiger is at the pinnacle of his career. I mean, in the 2000s, he was lethal on a golf course.
Couldn't be stopped.
He could not be. He was more like a machine than a man. Yeah. And everybody knew that on the tour about him. He beat people before they showed up because he was mentally that tough, and he was so physically gifted and talented. But while he was that good, his personal life was completely off the rails. And it was exhausting at times to write the chapters as we were bouncing back and forth between what was going on inside the ropes and what was happening outside the ropes. Outside the ropes was all secretive. No one knew about it. His swing coach, his caddy, his wife. I mean, the people who were closest to him did not realize what he was doing privately and how out of control it had become. I think it's extraordinary. It's actually stressful to think about, to feel the complete out of control aspect of his personal life and the utter dominance in his professional life. I don't know many human beings who can function professionally when their personal life is completely out of control like his was. And both Armin and I, there were so many times when we'd be on the phone going, this is amazing that this guy can perform at this level, this kind of greatness, where the margin of error in golf can be centimeters. And he is so focused and so good and so able to concentrate. And the minute he steps off the course, he's in a whirlwind all the time. How does he do that? And that's one of the questions we answered in the book.
Can't even imagine going through stuff like that. So you guys worked on this for over 3 years, interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. And what I found interesting is that Tiger is such a private guy. But there are so many people who have come in contact with him, going back to his kindergarten teacher and people who loaned their houses to him when he was playing tournaments. What was most revealing about talking to these people when we don't know very much about this person at all?
Well, one of the things we tried to do when we set out, I mean, Armin and I kind of had our plan was, we don't want to just talk to people that have already talked. I mean, the whole idea of a biography is you want to provide a reader with a 400 to 500 page thick tome of material that's largely all new. Our mandate was, we want to learn something new about Tiger Woods on every single page. So we purposely set out to find people who had never talked before, but who had intimate access to Tiger at one stage or another in his life. And we found a lot of those people. Now, some of those people had signed NDAs and legally couldn't talk, or they could talk, but they couldn't be sources and stuff like that. But the point was, let's talk to the kindergarten teacher. Let's talk to his principal. Let's talk to the woman who rented her home to him in Augusta every year. Let's talk to the girl that he met when they were, young adults, who became his confidant and more like a sister than a girlfriend. Had healthy relationships with him that weren't intimate in physical ways. Let's talk to Alicia O'Meara, who was like his mom on the PGA Tour. Who taught him how to scuba dive? Let's find that guy who went deep in the sea with him. Because the insight there was, the one place on earth that Tiger was comfortable besides inside the ropes was deep beneath the sea. And the idea that he liked it down there because there were no people down there. Like, to me, that's fascinating. It says a lot about that guy. Well, we can't learn that if you don't find the guy who taught him scuba diving lessons. And that guy's a nobody, meaning no one knows his name and no one's ever interviewed him before. That's the kind of guy we want to interview. So we were looking for those kinds of people, and we were fortunate to find a lot of them.
And we really found out about the human Tiger Woods. We found out about Eldrick, not just Tiger, not just the golfer, and that's really a very interesting part of this book.
Yeah.
So I guess the question I have is that you guys didn't talk to Tiger. There were obviously huge restrictions on that.
Right.
Do you think Tiger will ever open the book and take a look?
I don't know. I mean, I think it would be presumptuous of us to think that he would. I do know that he has a history of reading what's written about him. There were a lot of critical things written about him that he didn't like when he first joined the tour by, big name writers. Right. I don't know. I mean, I think that we can't really worry about that. I wish we could have talked to him. We made our attempts. We just wanted to have a conversation with him. I mean, I would have been happy to have a conversation with him, and maybe it never would have got to the interview stage. Sure. But it would have been nice to just be able to sit down man to man and talk about what we were doing and what we were setting out to do, which is what Armin and I wanted. But his handlers never allowed us to get past that.
And so if you were to have that conversation, you spent so much of your time focusing on his childhood. Right. Would you ask him about his childhood? Or what would you focus on if you were to have that intimate personal conversation? Well,
now is different. Like, if you're asking me how I would do it now.
How would you do it now? Yeah.
I would not ask him questions now. And I wouldn't, again, I think it would be presumptuous to expect him to do something like that. I would be more interested in just having a conversation with him, because look, this guy's been probed, picked, scoped, and followed his whole life.
From 2 years old on.
Yeah, and we just did that for 3 years. To a certain extent, he could look at us as, yeah, and you guys just came along and did the same thing. And I get that, I do. And I respect that as a journalist, that every time you approach someone, it's a privilege that they give you access and allow you to talk to them. I'm incredibly respectful of that, and so is Armin. And I think if we'd had that opportunity with Tiger just to communicate with him, I said up front, Armin and I made it clear, yes, we'd like to interview Tiger, but we'd like to begin with a conversation. And most of the time, that's how I'm able to build relationships with people that enable you to eventually have interviews. We never had that chance with Tiger. I wish we had. I'd like it still. I mean, we're not writing a book now, but I'd still be very open to that. But I'm not holding my breath waiting for that to happen.
So Jeff, finally, we were talking before, Tiger's basically only lived half of his life so far, which is crazy to think about. So when you think about his legacy overall, between his incredible rise, his meteoric fall, the comeback now, what should define his legacy when we look back on him 10, 15 years down the road?
Well, I guess the answer to that depends on how far down the road you want to go. I think if, like, sitting where we are right now, if you look back historically at people that we consider geniuses or one of a kind, whether it's, writers like Shakespeare, artists like Picasso, you just go down the list. I think Tiger as an athlete belongs in that conversation. He's that kind of figure. And so I think there will eventually come a day, maybe not in our lifetime, where what people focus on almost exclusively about him is his greatness on the golf course. And all of these other things will probably fall by the wayside eventually. That's not going to happen anytime soon, but eventually that's what it is, because at the end of the day, I think with geniuses, with prodigies, what people are ultimately interested in is what they contributed. Why do people watch him? Because they want to see what he's going to do on the golf course, because they know the potential is to see something that they'll never see again. That's the end of the day for Tiger Woods. Right now, in the moment, he's still saddled with, you know, all the other things that have come out in public display because of the media age we live in. But I do think that there will be a day historically where those things will be a lot less pervasive in his narrative, and it'll be more laser focused on the thing he was great at.
The story continues to unfold. That's Jeff Benedict. His new book, Tiger Woods, is out. Jeff, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on The Sit Down.